Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera and I will be your host today. Today we have a very special guest. We have Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Justice Gaziano here today to talk to us about a very important issue regarding Annie Dookhan and the Hinton lab. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Justice Gaziano, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's really my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Your Honor, please talk to us about the ramifications of Annie Dookhan's actions.
As some people may know, Annie Dookhan was a person who was an analyst who tested drugs at the state Department of Public Health laboratory, the Hinton laboratory in Boston. And she tampered with evidence or mishandled evidence as a state police chemist and affected 22,000 cases in eastern Massachusetts.
And how long did this conduct go through?
A period of between 5 and 8 years where she tampered with evidence.
And how does this tampering of evidence affect people?
So people that have been convicted of crimes, the integrity of their conviction is in question because the evidence that was introduced against them in court was really compromised. So people who had cases where she was the primary chemist really had an injustice done to them.
These are criminal cases.
Yes.
And this had to do with drugs. What kind of, the Hinton lab, what kind of cases are affected by the Hinton lab and criminal, civil?
But there were criminal cases and they involved different substances, but mostly cocaine and heroin, where she tampered with evidence over a period of time.
And by that means that she was changing the...
She didn't, what she did was she did what they call dry lab, and where she would take evidence and she wouldn't really test it. Then she would swear that she tested it.
Oh.
So she actually went to jail. She was prosecuted and she went to jail for her conduct.
And Your Honor, and I'm not sure if you could maybe describe a little bit more, how do people get affected by this tests and the Hinton lab results?
So what we have are 22,000 people across eastern Massachusetts who had been convicted of crimes, and their convictions are called into question by her actions. So what we're trying to do is to publicize, to tell the public about their rights and the fact that they may have been part of this, and to give people information about how they can have their cases challenged. So
Annie Dookhan, the chemist, was fraudulently changing the results.
Yes.
Of this drug tests.
Right, and whether or not she did it, her conduct happened over this long period of time, unchecked. And as a judicial system, we take the integrity of the evidence very seriously. It's a really critical part of any type of case, any type of prosecution. So we want to inform people of their rights.
And how did this information come to light? How did they know?
It came slowly. It came to light. At first it was a few cases, then it turned into many, many, many cases. And this has been going on, this investigation and this litigation has been going on for many years.
And do we know the motivation, or what was this chemist objective in doing this?
As the criminal case bore out, the objective of Ms. Dookhan, it appears to be, was to be a superstar. So she took shortcuts with evidence in order to be more prolific, to test more cases than anyone else.
And Your Honor, the people who were affected by this, how do we know? How do they know that these cases, this results from her actions, caused them harm in their convictions? How do we?
And they're going to know because what we did, there was another case that came out of that, the Bridgman case. And as a result of the Bridgman case, the district attorney's offices on their own dismissed a great number, 98% of the cases. So there were over 21,000 cases that were dismissed by the district attorney's offices because they realized they couldn't prosecute those cases anymore. Those cases have been tampered with. So there are a number of people in Suffolk County who have had their cases dismissed, and we're going to inform them that they had their cases dismissed by sending them letters.
Very good. So as a result of the Bridgman case, people started focusing on Annie Dookhan. And now tell us, did that become a case, the Annie Dookhan? What happened?
Right. So there are two different processes. So Annie Dookhan herself was prosecuted.
Yes.
And she went to jail, and she was punished for her conduct. But after, then the justice system had to figure out, well, what do we do with the cases that she affected? One case, there's many cases that came out of what she did, but one case had to do with how we get people lawyers for all these issues. And that came before the Supreme Judicial Court, where I sit. And we issued a decision earlier this year. And as a result of that decision, the district attorneys went back to all those cases and decided, well, which ones do we want to prosecute? Which ones are we going to dismiss? And to their credit, the district attorney's offices dismissed the vast number of those cases.
Of the Annie Dookhan cases, of the 20, I'm sorry, what was the amount?
So 22,000 cases and 21,500 roughly were dismissed by the district attorney's offices.
And the remainder?
The remainder are another issue. So I'll give you some numbers. So in Suffolk County, District Attorney Conley dismissed 98.5% of his cases. But what remains are about 300 people whose cases were affected by Annie Dookhan, and their cases have not been dismissed. So it's going to be up to those folks to get information, and if they want to dismiss their case, they have to take affirmative steps.
Those 300 people, what are the steps that the court and the state is taking to inform them that they were affected by Hinton Lab?
So on June 6th, the Supreme Judicial Court are going to send 2 letters out.
Okay.
The first letter goes to that vast number of people who had their cases dismissed. And we're just going to inform people, and we mail it to the last known address, and we're going to inform people, you had a case that was dismissed. Now, you don't have to do anything if your case was dismissed, but you should know about your own query. You should know about your own criminal record that's been cleared up as a result of this, because it could have profound effects on employment, on housing opportunities, and on immigration status. So we want to just let people know that their cases were dismissed. The second group of people, letter number 2, we'll call it, those are the people whose cases were not dismissed. In Suffolk County, there are 117 people. Statewide, or in the Eastern Mass, there's 300 people. We're going to send them a letter that says you could have your case dismissed. And that gives them information they need to contact lawyers. You have a right to a lawyer, of course, and to see whether or not they want to go forward and have their case dismissed.
Your Honor, Justice Gaziano, please tell us, why weren't these 300 cases dismissed if these were affected by these actions?
The district attorneys had an opportunity to look at all these cases, and again, to their credit, they decided that there were some cases they can still prove, or they think they can still prove, even with the misconduct of Annie Dookhan. So under our state constitution, the district attorneys have a right to pursue criminal matters. And they looked at their cases and they decided that small percentage of people, they still can prosecute. So those are the ones where they just didn't flat out dismiss them. And that has to go to court again to see if they're going to be dismissed. But people should know, nobody's going to go back to jail. No one's going to have any issues like that. The only issue that's going to be decided is whether or not the cases get vacated, as we call it, or undone, where you had a drug conviction and you will no longer have a drug conviction.
Now, Your Honor, you said these letters are going to be mailed on June 6th.
Yes.
And to the last known address. And what happens if, in that case, someone moved or they no longer live in that place or they're homeless?
That's why we're here.
Yes.
We're trying to publicize as best we can in as many venues as we can to let people know. Because we realize that it may have been years where they had a last known address and they may have moved. They may be homeless now, unfortunately. So what we're trying to do is use any media outlet we can, including shows like this, to try to get the word out that if you did have a case and it is affected, you should know your rights.
Your Honor, please let us know, for the people who are out there who where of the 300 remainder cases that are out there, the people may be afraid. These were already settled cases. They pled, and now they come to find out this new evidence that was tampered with. Should anyone be afraid? Will there be maybe a reason that they feel, I don't want to come back to court, I've already been through this, there's double jeopardy? And would you please explain to us all that process and what should people do? How should they feel about this approach?
The most important thing they can do is to call a hotline.
Okay.
So there's a hotline that's being staffed by the Committee for Public Counsel Service, our public defenders. And we've got the number that's going out, and that'll be, hopefully, that's going to be on the screen. And people can call the public counsel office, and they can ask a lawyer. And that number, that hotline is staffed during business hours, 9 to 5. And if they leave a message, of course, after that, they'll get calls back. And the lawyers can talk to them and to assure them about what their rights are and to help them through this process. But I will say that under our law, if you had a conviction, nobody's going back to jail. No one's going to get any more time. This has to do with undoing a conviction, not sending anyone back to jail. And I know some people want to be left alone, and that's perfectly their right. But we feel, as a court, that people should know what their options are. And the best way to do that is to call that hotline and get advice from a lawyer.
And it is important to remark that people who they will be speaking to will be attorneys. What are the privileges they have with this conversation regarding privacy and other issues?
Right. So anyone that can't afford a lawyer, of course, in our system is given a lawyer. They will talk to a lawyer, and when you talk to a lawyer, you have an attorney-client privilege. So anything that's said between a client and the lawyer cannot be disclosed. And
these phone calls are confidential?
Confidential.
And they are attorneys who are keeping this privilege of...
Right. In the public counsel's office, the ACLU has been really at the forefront of this litigation. And they are well schooled in these legal issues. They are experts in it, and people should feel confident that when they call public counsel on the CPCS hotline, they're going to get really good information, and they're going to have the facts they need and the law they need to make informed decisions.
What is happening with this woman now, Annie Dookhan, that became a case? What's the status of this case now?
She pled guilty, and she went to jail.
And she's in jail?
Yes. Well, she's actually out of jail now, but she did. I mean, she was punished by the state, and her case is over.
And Your Honor, just to wrap up, please let us know. Tell us about your background a little bit. How did you come about to be a justice of the Supreme Judicial Court? And how did you come about this very important issue of Annie Dookhan?
Right. I was assigned, I've been on the court for all of a year. I was sworn in by Governor Baker earlier this year. And this is, it's really been my honor to serve on this wonderful and historic court. I was a trial judge primarily in Suffolk County in the Superior Court for over 10 years, for 12 years, before I became a Supreme Judicial Court judge.
Your Honor, we still have a little time, like 10 minutes, but I wanted to ask you, I would like to maybe, if you could discuss the collateral consequences of having a criminal conviction for drugs in your record.
Sure, and that's a real hot topic, I know, that people want to know about. So it really affects people in so many ways. It affects public housing issues.
Meaning that if you have public housing, you will be evicted.
Yeah, you may not have rights to public housing. It affects job status when people apply for jobs in this. And I know there's a big movement for quarry reform in that area. It can affect immigration status, of course, as well. But it just really affects people in so many ways. And that's why we want to let people know that they do have a conviction and they have the ability to have that conviction undone. They probably should take advantage of that.
And how do we know that these cases were touched by the chemist and by this particular drug laboratory?
That's a really good question, and we've actually taken care of that because normally if someone brings what we call a motion for new trial or a motion to vacate a guilty plea where they want to undo something, we make that person prove that they were wronged. That's the way the system works. After you've been convicted, you have to prove that you were wrong, that your lawyer messed up, that something happened. In the Annie Dookhan situation, we have what's called in the law a conclusive presumption. You don't have to prove that. If Annie Dookhan was the chemist and she signed your certificate, we're going to presume that she tampered with your drugs, with the drug sample. So you don't have to prove that. As long as in every court case, the chemist has to sign a certificate that says who worked on it. And if her signature's on that certificate, then we're going to presume that she tampered with your drugs and your conviction is in question.
And Your Honor, I'm not sure if you know, are these cases mainly Boston or are these cases all over the state? What's the jurisdiction?
Eastern Massachusetts. There's quite a few in Boston, but they really go from the counties, Bristol County, down to New Bedford, Brockton, up the North Shore as well. But a good number of them were in Suffolk County.
And now the hotline, how is it available? Is it available 24 hours? How can, for the people out there?
Sure. It's 9 to 5, and it's staffed by lawyers and public counsel. But obviously, if people work and they can't call during those working hours, they can leave a number and they'll get a call right back.
Great, Your Honor.
And I should also say, if you want more information, we have on our Supreme Judicial Court website a link that they can look at where they can get to. So our website is mass.gov, and if you click on mass.gov, if you go to the courts, it'll show our website, and there'll be a sidebar that has Annie Dookhan case information. So if people want to look at it that way and they want to get that out, so it's mass.gov, courts, and Annie Dookhan. They can follow the links that way. And we also have links to copies of the letters that are going out as well.
Now, Your Honor, the Dookhan case actually was a Superior Court case. It came from there. How did it appear in the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts?
What happened was once the fallout from all her misconduct was revealed, there's been so many cases involving what happens to the cases, what happens to convictions, who has to prove what to get them undone. And there's less than 10, but there's a great number of cases involved in that. The last case we had actually came back a second time, this Bridgman case, that had to do with how we're going to get all these people lawyers. So we had to look at that as a court and figure out, are we going to just dismiss all these cases on our own? Are we going to have a procedure? And we came up with a procedure this is the fallout of it with these letters that go out.
Your Honor, please talk to us about the right to counsel when you are charged with a criminal offense.
Right. So we have you have a right to counsel in our state constitution and our federal constitution guarantees you the right to have a lawyer if you cannot afford one. And that's a primary right you have to get a lawyer, and that's what's been implicated in this case is, we have all these people, how are we going to get them lawyers? And that was what was really litigated in the Bridgman decision.
And the decision says that there is no question whether or not they have the right to an attorney. It's just that there are not enough attorneys.
Yeah, it really was how is that going to happen?
Okay.
Nobody. That's a really good point. Nobody thought about whether you get a lawyer. The question was, how is this going to happen? How many cases were involved? And how can we possibly get all these people, these 22,000 people, lawyers? And at the end of the day, the district attorneys looked at these cases and said, it's not going to be 22,000, it's going to be 300 because we're going to dismiss all these other cases.
Wonderful. And these 300 cases, how are they going to get attorneys, this 300?
They're going to call, so if you get notice, and if you don't get notice because you moved, hopefully you're hearing this,
yes.
Or you see it on the web, or some other social media method, and you call that hotline number, and you talk to public counsel, and if you can't afford a lawyer, you get a lawyer.
You just come to appear in you normally would appear to court, and then an attorney will be assigned to all those people who are under certain poverty guidelines, or would it be in general just because it's a matter of Dookhan?
It would be you'd have to you'd have to do like any other person, and to show that you can't afford a lawyer on your own. But the public counsel will have lawyers available for people who get lawyers.
Thank you, Justice Gaziano.
Well, thank you.
We actually have run out of time, but for everyone watching, this episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today we had Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Justice Gaziano to talk to us and to illustrate us and really teach us to please spread the word about the Hinton lab and the Dookhan case.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.